Hello there, Miss Brown here. So today is Wednesday, and we are going to be talking about climate regions. So my gift, it's like my intentions with it were to make it look like they were walking around the world. But today we are going to talk about climate regions. So yesterday in class and in the instructional video from Tuesday, at the end, I asked, do you think weather is the same everywhere? And so in class on Tuesday, we talked about, a lot of you guys said no. And some explanations were that there are different regions. Somebody said that there is the equator smack dab in the middle, and it separates the world into two hemispheres, and we have a north and a south. Someone said that there were different climate regions. Somebody else said that temperature is different everywhere. And all of that is correct. All of that is correct. So, weather is not the same everywhere. Sometimes it's like, yeah, because we only think about the United States or we only think about South Carolina, but around the entire world, weather is not the same everywhere, okay? And so some of you may ask, but why? Why is weather not the same? And the answer is, drumroll please, climate regions. So today we are going to talk about climate regions, all right? So we know that climate is the weather that happens over a period of time. And a region is like a specific area. So we have the South Carolina region, we have North Carolina regions, or there are different regions, all right? So there are three climate regions, and we see that climate regions is underlined, which means we are writing this down in our science notebook. All right, so the first one is tropical. So as we are writing these down, I want you to make sure you leave a little space. That way you can write stuff either below it or beside it. All right, so the first one we have the tropical region. All right, next we have the temperate region. And lastly, we have the polar region. So when you hear tropical, what comes to mind? When you hear tropical, what comes to mind? I know when I think of tropical, I think of like the beach, water, pineapples, coconuts. All right, so all of those things, based off of all of my observations, when I think of tropical, what type of weather do you think? Is it going to be like cold or warm? I said beach. It's going to be pretty warm, all right? So the tropical region, it's going to be humid. And we know that humidity is the amount of water vapor that is in the air. So that makes sense. If it's a tropical region, it's by the water, which means it's going to be humid. It's going to be hot. It's going to do a lot of rain, all right? So tropical, humid, hot, and rainy. Temperate. So have you ever heard somebody say, oh, they have a bad temper? Temperate, it means they're calm. All right, so it's not too cold, it's not too hot. It's like right in the middle. It's like the unbiased loyal friend. It's not going to take a side. It's not going to be too hot. It's not going to be too cold. It's just going to be just right. All right. And so we, the United States, is in the temperate region. All right. All right. And then lastly, polar. When we hear polar, what do we think of? Polar bears, North and South Pole. Is it the beach up there or is it like snow? It snows. So polar, it's cold. All right. So we have tropical, which is warm. We have polar, which is cold. And then smack dab in the middle, we have the temperate. It's the best of both worlds. All right. So temperature and precipitation determine the climate. The temperature and precipitation. So what do we think? Do we think it's going to be like 80 degrees or like negative 20 degrees in the polar region? Negative 20 degrees. And do we think it's going to do more like raining or snowing in the polar region? Snowing. So that means that that is that polar region. It's cold, all right? So temperature and precipitation determine the climate. All right, so now let's draw this out because Miss Brown is a visual person, so let's draw this out. So I want you to draw a circle as best as you can, all right? And so yesterday in class, in one of my classes, somebody said the reason why weather isn't the same because there is something smack dab in the middle that separates the northern and the southern hemispheres. And what is that line that is smack dab in the middle? We have the equator, all right? So the equator is an imaginary line, so it's not a line in the earth. Like if we were to go to the equator, we wouldn't see a line. But it's that middle, it's a line, an imaginary line that separates the northern and the southern hemispheres. So we are going to get to drawing. Miss Brown is going to do the best she can. So we have north, east, south, and west. All right, so the equator is separating the northern and the southern hemisphere. All right, and the equator, it's really, what do you think the temperature is like? What do we know about the equator? What are some things we've heard about the equator before? It's hot. So it is so hot at the equator. It is the hottest place because it gets the most sunlight. It gets the most sunlight from anywhere in the world. It gets the most sunlight. So those sun rays are hitting at a higher angle right at the equator. All right, so we are going to divide our first region. So we are going to draw our first region. Okay, in our first region, so we have 0 degrees. So the equator is 0 degrees, all right? And then right here is 30 degrees. Out of the 3 regions, we have tropical, temperate, and polar. Which one do we think is best to go closest to the equator? Remember, we said it's hot at the equator. So out of the 3, do we think that humid, hot rain in the tropical region is best? Do we think that not too cold, not too hot is best? Or do we think the polar? Well, we can go ahead and eliminate polar. The polar isn't going to be right by the equator because that's not going to make sense for it to be really hot at the equator but really cold in the polar. All right. But at the equator, the region closest to the equator is the tropical region. All right. Tropical region. Okay. So remember, we have that hot, humid. Okay. Next, the next region goes from 30 degrees to 60 degrees. So we have 60 degrees. And out of temperate and polar, what region is going to go in the middle? Remember that temperate. Oops, I want to do this. Temperate, all right? It's not too cold. It's not too middle. It's not too cold. It's not too hot. It's the best of both worlds. Have y'all heard that Hannah Montana song, Best of Both Worlds? All right, so it's not too hot. It's not too cold. And then up at the top, 90 degrees, we have the polar region. All right, so they are getting little sunlight up in the polar region, which is why it is so cold. So we have the north and south poles, okay? So we have our northern hemisphere filled out, but what about the southern hemisphere? Let's fill out the southern hemisphere. So we are going to draw our lines. We have 30 degrees latitude. So we're going to talk about latitude and longitude in the next couple of days. All right. So what region is closest to the equator? The tropical region, right? So we are writing tropical region, okay? And then the region that is smack dab in the middle, best of both worlds, temperate. All right. right? And then up at the poles, we have the polar regions, all right? So I'm actually surprised that this is really neat. It's neater than I thought it was going to be. And so I have a map, an actual map for us, okay? So we are right in here. So not exactly, but okay. That's the best it's gonna get. All right, so we are right in here. All right. So we have our equator. We see our equator is right here, right in the middle. And then we have our north and our south poles. Okay. We have our 0, 15, 30, 45. We have our latitudes. Okay. So, like we said, what region is going to go closest to the equator and goes to 30 degrees latitude? It is the tropical region. I was about to say temperate. It is the tropical region. All right. So the tropical region is right like where Africa, we have like South America. Okay, so that is that tropical region. And also India is included in that tropical region, and they get like monsoons. When I went to India, it didn't rain a lot because we weren't there during their rainy season. But India gets a lot of rain, but that makes sense because they are in the tropical region. So they have that hot, it's humid. It's humid because it's a lot of water vapor in the air. Okay, and it rains a lot. All right. So next we have the region where we are located. So we have tropical is from 0 to 30. Okay. 0 to 30. Then we have what region goes from 30 to 60, and that's where we are located. That is the temperate region. All right, so we're located right in that temperate region. It's not too cold and it gets not too hot, and that makes sense because when we think about our weather, yes, it gets cold, but it doesn't get cold like how it gets in Norway. When we were talking about weather in our live session yesterday, we noticed that Norway, it was like 30 something degrees and it was snowing. So it doesn't get too hot, it doesn't get too cold. We get the best of both worlds, all right? So that is the temperate region. And then lastly, up at the top where the polar bears and Santa Claus are, we have the polar region. Okay, so we have Russia up there, we have like Greenland, Canada is up there. So those are those polar regions. They get really, 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 really cold weather. Okay, so we have our northern hemisphere, but we cannot forget about our southern hemisphere. So just like about the top in the northern hemisphere, that tropical region is closest to the equator. So this is including like Brazil, all of South America, South Africa, Australia. Okay, Australia is also included in like that temperate. So it gets that tropical weather, but it's kind of like temperate as well. Okay, so but it's still and considered as that temperate region, and then polar. And we have Antarctica and the southern poles. All right, so let's reflect. Let's write down just one more time. Polar, cold, temperate. I want to write best of both worlds. I'm just going to say middle. And then tropical, I'm going to say warm and humid. And it's important that we know that it's going to be humid because it's surrounded by a lot of water. So if we see on our map, it's nothing but like water right in here, water. So it's going to be really tropical. There's going to be a lot of water vapor in the air, and there's going to be a lot of rain that happens. All right. So next week or tomorrow, we're going to talk more about climate regions. We're going to talk about latitude, and just go a little bit more in depth with this, okay? But some reminders. So, reminder there will be no class Wednesday because RI and MI testing and Thursday. So I believe y'all are taking the RI testing on Wednesday, and then your MI math inventory test is on Thursday. Make sure you're completing your weather journal. So it's up on Schoology. You need to make sure that you are writing down the air pressure, temperature, and humidity every day for this week. This is a super easy 100, you guys. Excuse me. Super easy 100, so make sure you guys do that. It's going to be due Friday at 11:59. And then there's some assignments in Schoology. So right after this video, go complete your quizzes. That's another easy 100. So just like with the Brain Pop video last week where you watched the video and then you took the quiz and then you took a screenshot and sent me your score, that's what you're going to do with the quizzes. However, with the quizzes, you have unlimited attempts to take the quizzes game, okay? So if you make like a 40 and you're not satisfied with your score, you can take it again. However, it is due by Friday at 11:59. Also, there's another assignment in Schoology, your Weather Tools Critical Thinking worksheet. I had to look and make sure I was naming it right. All right, so go check in Schoology, look at the folders for all your assignments. And as always, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. Bye.